to, well, why is this going to be spiritual space? Why is this going to be the dance hall space? Why is this going to be the food space? Those, I guess, are mundane actions that are, for me, very important with the work to actually draw out and unpack and make an artistic statement or a dance or visual images and what that means for me as a future.
I'm still glad you mentioned on the future. Because one of the things that I know is a big part of your work, and particularly of the series that this work is part of, is Afrofuturism, because that's a theory as an aesthetic. And I was thinking a lot about that as I watched it this evening, with the combination of the projections and the way that you orchestrated the dancers in the space and the kind of movements that they were doing. And I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so when it comes to the this concept or practice or movement of Afrofuturism, in the opening of the work, we essentially were in what we created called the Haiti section, and in considering what Haiti means to this hemisphere is extremely important, especially in this idea of what Blackness is. And so as we're entering the space, one of the movements that we're referencing, we're not directly doing it, is the Yonvalu practice of Haiti, which is one of the essential movement forms and systems found within Haitian Voodoo. And for me, that spiritual system, those movements are futuring practices and what they mean. They also were related to the projections of what we were symbolizing with for me, kind of remixing the Haitian images, these, if you will, this language and iconography, which is a part of Haitian Voodoo as well. Then it moves into the Mississippi section. And so I wanted to really form this visual landscape, if you will, so it kind of recreates the idea of where my other familiar roots are from in Mississippi, and then also in the Deep South, stretching into Georgia, and what that looks like, and how much land, especially in the lineage and history of Black culture, especially African American culture in the United States, has really been connected to these ideas of being within land and what that means. So we created this virtual landscape of a cotton field into a starlit sky. I remember one of the first times I went to Mississippi with my grandmother, who was sitting right there. We went to her mother's house, and it was, I'm not sure if it might have been cotton field. I believe it was. I just remember that was the first time I remember not seeing streetlights. Being born and raised in Chicago, that's a part of, the nightlife. And it was just like, oh, wow, it is nothing but stars, and it was then very interesting looking at that contrast of like, wow, just open field. And then the starlit sky is very interesting because the Mississippi Delta in that region of Mount Bayou, it's very flat. And so I wanted to kind of recreate that. And then it moves into the Chicago section where, it's this kind of idea of how the migration kind of happened of moving up, along the Mississippi River into various cities, within the north, and how that it was, a constant sense of ascension and moving forward, metaphorically and realistically. And then it finally moved into this Black space section. Where it was essentially, the future essentially is really going to happen within ourselves, within our bodies, and that's how we literally have to affect, what is seen, what is felt, what is heard, and that moves into, that was the Adrift duet, which is also referencing a visual artist named Kerry James Marshall, and then the final section, the Black space section, I kind of revisited one of the circle image you saw is something called the Bakongo cosmogram from the Bantu Congo region in Central Southern Africa. And Bantu Congo hieroglyphs are also some of the source African writing systems, which got readapted into Haitian Voodoo. But then if you even study the Geechee Valley colonies, the Carolina Seacoast, you can see images of Bantu Congo hieroglyphic writing systems that were indeed translated and brought from the African continent to the North American continent as well. So yeah, all of these things are kind of like going into the work, which for me, I've identified as really future practices.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we can open it up for some broader discussion and then follow up on what's going on. Does anyone have any questions for Andre? And I think we do have a mic that will come to you.
I have a question about how your process works, like gathering all these informations and working with the people on your team as well as your company to create this beautiful performance.
Thank you. The performers are here actually. This is Kentoria Earl. This is Candace Thompson-Zachary. This is Michaela Ware. Here is the arts director, then Joseph. And then still backstage is our costume designer, Joy Havens. I can actually start with Joy. One of the inspirations behind this work was this idea of flight. And so especially within African American culture, flight, the metaphor and the analogy of it has always been a constant iteration within specifically African American culture. I fly away in the morning. And so this idea of flying has been kind of the way. I don't want to just say escaping. That's too. It's almost too easy, but then too much fraud with the word. But flying is really a sense of like ascension. And so one of the inspirations I saw, there was this image I came across of a Black woman aviator in the Second World War that were all through the history of it. I was like, wow, they also part of the Tuskegee Airmen, and they were I can try to source that image, and it was just amazing because there's 4 Black women in front of this World War II fighter aircraft in flight suits, and it's just, and again, that's kind of the whole point within Afrofuturism. This is like, oh wow, we're unpacking these images which you don't see. In 1942, you have Black women training fighter pilots. There's the documentation of it, but that's not the narrative we ever hear. You know what I mean? And so it's just like, well, yeah, exactly. We still flying. You know what I mean? You can then go take it to Kanye. You know what I mean? It's just like, and so part of the image for the costume was this idea of the flight suit. And so we go through various iterations of it. And then we also went through a lot of images of the Maroons and Maroon communities and how they wore their garb. And white was a very, very important color as well, across from Suriname to Quilombos in Brazil to Haiti. And so we created these various wrappings and iterations of the cloth, which is again a really important part of Black existence within this hemisphere. And then the final look we created was this parachute, this harness, if you will. So again, that's kind of one of the main ways in which explicitly every single element of the work had a very, very specific meaning and it was anchored in something. So yeah, I guess I'll keep it short from there as we can move on. But I guess that's one of the ways in which that's happened. And then beyond, of course, working with all the performers in their various individual narratives and who they are, where they come from. And you can look at our website to find that out. So
Great. And should we invite the performers onto the stage? Yes.
Well, while they're figuring that out, we'll,
Any other questions?
You know, we can need to open that.
We like questions.
well, maybe one thing that we can do now that everyone is on stage, as people are continuing to think, maybe your company could also talk a little bit about their experience inside the process to continue on this question that Jasmine started. Hi. So I've been in the process the longest because before the work permit in 2017, we did like small iterations of some of the concepts that became the larger piece. And having worked with Andre in other projects, I feel like this one was really able to delve deeply into each section or like each movement concept or each cultural concept that he wanted to unpack because we had so much time, like this has been going on since 2016. We were able to go deeply into, what these people, like what their lives were like, what they wore, the sound of it, the rhythm of it, what movement would fit well with the experience we were trying to create. And then as we got closer and closer to the full work, I feel like it was easy for us to also get lost in the world that we created because it kept building layers. So to get to this moment where I feel like we've been able to live so explicitly in each layer, like being at this moment feels like really gratifying because we've been able to gather all this information and process it through our bodies. So.
Hi, I'm Kintoria Earl. I joined the process second of the group last fall. So I joined midway through the process. Mississippi meeting had already been completed. And I was able to be a part of the collaboration creating Chicago in Black space. Similar to what Candace was saying, there's a lot of layers. And being able to be part of a process that dives deep into culture, into identity, was very important for me. It's kind of really pushed me what I'm studying in grad school, but that's a different story. So it was just great to learn about the history and the richness of culture and the lineage of Andre that can link to all of us, I think, because we all have roots that are like transnational and very deep and rich in Blackness. So being a part of the process was very influential, very enlightening, and it was just great to be able to move with such a great community.
I joined in August, I believe. So I'm really new, guys. So this process for me became very, very, very personal. I think maybe because I had to really like understand exactly like what it is that I was bringing to the piece personally to see like where not belong, but kind of like understand where I am in this space in relation to you, because I'm taking in so much information but also I'm taking in a lot of information and not really understanding like my own history. And so in the beginning, that kind of became a little scary to me. I was like, why don't I know these things? And me being 23 from Atlanta, Georgia, and like I have family very rooted in the South, and my parents, and so it's like this process was a huge learning experience for me, and then to just be able to take this information and to really put it in my body, that was a journey for me, and that's when things started to make sense. Is when I started to really like move with that information and take it as my own and interpret it as my own. But also just being able to have time to be in conversation with everyone was also extremely important instead of just learning the choreography. But we were able to like really get together in the space and to like go over section by section exactly what this means, movement by movement. And so then pieces started to come together and make sense for me. So, yeah.
Thank you. It's up in the back.
Wonderful piece. Y'all are beautiful. And it's beautiful to see sisters with different kinds of natural hair. Just want to shout that out. Different presentations of that. Was it? First thing, one of the things that I was curious about is the absence, and again, this is my stuff, but the absence of conflict. I was sort of watching y'all's faces in the various movements. And when I think of Haiti, again, I think of victory and triumph and that. The meaning of revolution as resolution. But I didn't, when I watched your faces, I didn't see any sort of contortion or y'all even joy. That's, I missed it. And there was an uncertainty conflict, and then that got resolved, and that's the resolution. Then cool. But could you talk about the sort of presentation or absence of conflict? Because it was rooted in symmetry, affirmation, collaboration. Those, even when y'all were doing separate things, let me just show.
Yeah, that's an amazing question, and something definitely for us to consider moving forward. The conflict, I think when we consider conflict in our own discussions, I think it's been more internal, and kind of what is always that psychological state of navigation that can never really that can never really be planned. You know what I mean? It's literally like you wake up, being Black in the United States, especially, you wake up and you're just like, okay, there's no sense of, wow. The way, I guess, best way I can explain it is like, it is a constant improvisation every day, because there's no Black person in the United States that ever wakes up and it's just like, oh, this is gonna happen. I mean, every single Black person wakes up in the United States is like, well, this could happen today, this could happen today, this could happen today, and we just kind of improv through the day, like, that's a reality. So yeah, I guess that was built into. We try our best. I guess for me specifically, I've tried my best to really not necessarily so much through the facial expressions, because then there becomes a difference between characterization and embodiment. And embodiment is a very important part of what this experience should be, specifically for me in contemporary movement and contemporary performance. Characterization gets a little bit more into the realm of the theatrical, which is something, but it's not something necessarily that I'm going for within this practice in itself, which I do think is important. But within this idea of contemporary performance and dance, I would say it's more about how do you actually embody that state. So like the conflict definitely is something where, yeah, I'm literally asking the audience to like read it in the body language, see this tension that exists as and I think you actually just said it as well. You were witnessing that between the way we're putting ourselves in space and in the negative space between us, and that's actually it. That is actually the thing. Going into it with, especially the face, that for me will cross a line into something that, how do I say it? If we were really in pain, then we would have to literally be in pain on stage. So that's going into like the realm of performance art. When you look at someone like Dred Scott, who Dred Scott is a performing artist who named himself after the 1850 Supreme Court decision of Dred Scott. But he had an infamous performance under the Manhattan Bridge in New York City, where he was getting sprayed with a fire hose to reference the 1963 marches in Birmingham, Alabama. And he would invite various student groups and people to see him literally getting hit by this fire hose, over this 30-minute time. And you have people literally just being like, stop, please stop. And, sometimes he would stop, sometimes he wouldn't. That for me is what I'm more interested in. It's just like, if you actually get hit by this fire hose, what happens to the face? That for me is where it's like, yeah, if we're in pain, then literally I would have to ask them to be in pain on the stage. And I can't do that at all.
I think when you said that, like, it was an aha moment for me because I hadn't considered that. But I think that in terms of this idea of Afrofuturism, like the piece is basically offering you a different perspective on all the associations you have with these places. So it's, yes, there's conflict within Haiti, but there's also all of these mechanisms that people use to get from day to day. In spite of all of that, like in the Great Migration, there were things that people did to get from point A to point B. In Chicago, in segregation, like what did they do? So it's like the conflict that story is already told. So this is like an alternate view of how we arrived, we're still here, one, and how we can keep going.
You have time for two more.
Thank you. Thanks for such a beautiful performance. I wanted to go back to the cultural signifiers and the mundane that you were talking about earlier, and I think we see them expressed both physically on stage and also digitally behind you and on the floor and the walls. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the interface or that you understand between those two ways of expressing those signifiers. How are they connecting with each other? I think I saw some part where there was some reflection going on, say some motion capture, something going on there. But I'm interested in what you see as the connection between those two mediums.
Especially, thank you for that question. Especially in the context of Afrofuturism, what we are trying to do is, in a way, not consider a technological realm simply a neutral space, but really, as you just said, well, how are various cultural signifiers going to actually shape the digital space, the virtual space, this web space, if you will, this interweb? Your experience of shaping that landscape is going to be definitely from your lineage, your history, your story, and what that means. What we're saying is in Afrofuturism, especially, is okay, well, what is the non-gendered Southeast Asian experience, and how does that then shape this digital space? Because there's going to be a completely different understanding, coding, algorithm of that lineage to shape the digital space. And I think that that's where it's not about necessarily, how do I say it? It's not about saying that needs to be its own space, but saying, no, that needs to actually influence how we are then in communication, in dialogue, in our own responsive systems of doing things. I think, if we can look at, we look at the banter and dialogue every day of digital landscapes. That's now part of our everyday lexicon. But it's shaped primarily by one singular entity of how to interact. And that's actually pretty horrifying. And it's supposed to be, in a sense, this neutral space. And it's like, well, okay, what does another language system, another existence, how does that even create a new system of actually, maybe it won't necessarily be a streamlined, landscape of Twitter or of communication. I mentioned, that platform because it's one of the most widely reported. But then from another instance, there might be a completely different platform of engaging and communicating that we have to make space for. And that's essentially what this is representing, not just in this work, but I'm trying to do within all the works I'm creating. Because, that for me, again, it's the future mechanism.
And our last question. There's someone up in the back.
Thank you so much, Andre, for sharing that beautiful piece. The new dancers look wonderful. I have two questions. Hopefully I don't sound too off. I totally understood the movement and I could see the conflict and the joy and the happiness. But I was puzzled how you came up with the choreography for the part where they're moving and you're not able to touch them, that area. And then the one where they are shaking and then they pass it on and the next person, like, how did you come up with that?
That's a great question. We call that the hate section. The hate, and I remember I was in the kitchen of my aunt, my grandmother's sister, my aunt Renegade, and she's a champion Scrabble. She can play Scrabble and and so she loves to brag about it. And she was just like, "Oh yeah, I was out in Naperville playing Scrabble, and I got somebody with the word. I got him with hate." And I was just like, "Hate? What is hate?" She was like, "You don't know that word, do you?" And I was just like, "No, what is a hate? Like hate? I'm like, what is hate?" She's like, "Hate is a ghost or a spirit or an ancestor. That's what we used to call it back in the city." I was just like, "Wow." So I went, Googled that, and I was like, "Man, this is amazing." And so hates were. Hate essentially is not just a ghost, but it really was something that symbolized this presence that was once alive that came to come back to haunt you, to help you, to be with you. And I was just like, wow, and for me in building this Afrofuturism work, I kept considering like, what are these elements of cultural residue? And even in language, I'm like, that's a word that definitely get brought from Mississippi to Chicago. You know what I mean? It's like, I ain't even talking about hates, but we do talk about ancestors and what that is. So, or in the same sense of, catching power, or in relationship to hate and, embodiment, being possessed by the loa, by the different, which are symbolized through the veve, and at who you call upon at certain points in your life. Do you need to call on Dambala, Ezuli, or one of the Orisha, who do you call on? Like, I need to call on Mother so and so. It's the reason why we have candles, in front of visuals, of people who have passed on. Right, altars are created. What that looks like, foods. That goes all the way back to to the continent, to Yoruba land. And so, in that sense, of the hate section, it represents, in our spiritual spaces, when someone is in possession, you're never ever trying to stop them. You don't ever stop. You let the spirit ride them until it's done. And so literally that's just what we were doing and how it gets passed on to each person. So that's what that moment kind of symbolized.
Was there a part 2 to your question, or did you get both parts in? Was there a part 2 to your question? You said you had 2 questions.
And how they passed on.
And how they passed on. Great, yeah, it was a really good sense of transmission and how things are passed through. Well, thank you so much, Andre and Renegade Performance Group, for this performance and your conversation. Thank you, everyone, for your conversation and for sticking around for this part. It's always so valuable to hear from the artists what's going on. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. And Andre is here
Thank you so much.
So I've been training. I found it.
What type of what y'all
I in the gym, taking dance class, running,
What did you click on? It was just working. Did you click deny access?
Like I said, it just popped up and that was it. Like, I didn't even put his password in. I just opened his laptop and what was on the screen was on the screen.
Yeah, I got this one down here. And,